I never thought I'd lose my son over a cat. But that's how it began. The moment he told me, as casually as if he were asking me to move a piece of furniture, to give away the only living creature that still kept me company. It was late afternoon, the air crisp and scented with pine, and the faint wood smoke drifting off the lake. I had just finished hanging the last string of Christmas lights along the mantel when my phone rang. I didn't bother checking the screen. I knew his voice the instant I heard it. Steady, distracted, clipped in that careful way he always sounded when he was building up to a request. "Hey, Mom," Ryan said. "Listen, we've been talking and there's something we need you to do before we come up." I smiled without meaning to, that small, automatic flash of hope that still sneaks in before reality settles. "What's that?" "Honey." He paused just long enough for something in my chest to tighten. "You're going to have to give Pumpkin away. Claire's mom is really allergic, and she'll be miserable if there's cat hair around. It's just for the holidays." For a second, I forgot how to breathe. I stared at the garland draped across the fireplace, at the tiny knitted stocking with Pumpkin's name stitched onto it. The words didn't fit together, like someone had stepped into my house and quietly rearranged the pieces of my life. "Give her away?" I repeated, so softly I wasn't sure I'd said it out loud. "Yeah, just until we leave," he said quickly in that businesslike tone he uses when he's decided the conversation is over. "It's not a big deal. You can take her to a shelter or ask someone to keep her. Mom, it's just a cat. Just a cat." The words landed like a slap he didn't even realize he'd given. I tried to picture the boy I raised, the one who used to curl up beside Pumpkin on the rug when he came home from college, who once built her a cardboard castle because she's royalty. That boy was nowhere in the man who now dismissed her as just a cat. I swallowed, forcing my voice to stay even. "She's family, Ryan. You know that." On the other end, he let out a long, impatient sigh. "Mom, come on, you always get emotional. It's just a few days. Doris can't be in a house with pet dander. She'll start coughing the moment she walks in. Do you really want her to have a miserable Christmas?" His words pressed down on me like a hand over my mouth. There it was again, the guilt, the way he shaped every choice so that my boundaries became selfishness, and his convenience became necessity. I could practically hear Claire in the background, her voice light, reasonable, urging compromise. For half a second, I wanted to ask, why can't Doris stay in a hotel? But the question died before it reached my lips. I already knew the answer, because it was always easier for everyone else if I bent, if I made myself smaller, if I disappeared around the edges of my own life. "Okay," I said at last, though my throat burned. "I'll think about it." He sounded relieved, almost cheerful. "Thanks, Mom. I knew you'd get it. We'll be there Friday night. Love you." The line went dead before I could find a reply. The room felt suddenly smaller, colder. The glow of the Christmas lights flickered softly in the window, reflecting a woman I barely recognized. Polite, accommodating, fading. Pumpkin patted over and rubbed her warm orange fur against my ankle, purring like nothing in the world had shifted. I knelt and buried my fingers in her coat. "It's okay, girl," I whispered, though my voice cracked. "We'll figure something out." But something in me had already changed. I moved through the evening like a ghost, folding towels, straightening the tree skirt, reheating soup I couldn't taste. Every ordinary gesture echoed the same thought. I had spent a lifetime bending. I bent when Ryan's father worked late, when the bills stacked up, when the world seemed to ask me to be grateful just to take up space, and even in my own home, I was still expected to yield. By the time the sky deepened and snow began to fall, resentment had taken root. Not loud or jagged, quiet, steady, patient. The kind of feeling that doesn't announce itself, but waits. I sat by the fire, watching the flames lick the logs, sifting through every small moment I'd swallowed over the years. Ryan forgetting to call on my birthday until the next day. Claire correcting my stories in front of the kids. "That's not how it happened, Jennifer." Doris's polite little jabs about my quaint house. Each one had been a splinter I'd ignored. Now they all smoldered together. The next morning, I found myself staring at the tree again. Every ornament held a piece of my life: Ryan's kindergarten paper angel, the glass bird my husband bought me our first Christmas, the crocheted star my mother made before she passed. They were the story of my home, my history. And with one phone call, they'd turned this place into a guest room. Pumpkin hopped onto the arm of my chair and pressed her head against my shoulder. Her purr was steady, a soft heartbeat against the noise in my mind. I stroked her back and felt something inside me settle, cold, sharp, clear. I wasn't going to argue, I wasn't going to cry, but I also wasn't going to forget. When Ryan told me to give away my cat, he didn't just draw a line, he crossed one. And for the first time in a long time, I realized I didn't have to step back. Outside, snow was falling heavier, draping the trees in silence. The lake beyond the window was glazing over, smooth and still. In that stillness, something inside me cooled into resolution. Not bitterness, but certainty. I turned off the lights, pulled a blanket over my legs, and listened to Pumpkin breathe beside me. In the warm glow of my living room, I finally let myself whisper the words I'd never dared to speak. I'm done making everything easy for everyone else. The words were quiet, nearly lost in the crackle of the fire, but they changed the room around me. Because for the first time in years, I meant them. The morning after that phone call, the house felt different. Too clean, too still. I drifted from room to room pretending to tidy up, but every sound seemed to echo off the walls, as if even the house itself was waiting for me to make a decision. I'd barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Ryan's voice again, calm, reasonable, asking me to give away Pumpkin just for the holidays, as if love could be put on pause and resumed whenever it suited someone else. By mid-morning, the sky had turned a heavy gray. Snow began to fall in soft spirals over Lake Arrowhead, settling along the porch rails and piling gently on the pine branches. I stood at the window for what felt like forever, watching it. There's a kind of quiet that only comes with falling snow, peaceful on the surface, but almost painfully honest underneath. Peaceful because everything looks untouched, angry because nothing in my life felt untouched anymore. My home, my space, suddenly didn't belong to me. Pumpkin brushed against my leg, meowing softly. She didn't understand any of this, of course. To her, I was home, the one who kept her safe. I knelt down and stroked her head. "You're not the problem," I whispered. "They are." My voice surprised me this time. It didn't shake. I pulled on my coat, wrapped a scarf around my neck, and carried Pumpkin across the road to Sam's house. Sam had been my neighbor for nearly 20 years. He was one of those people who could fix anything: leaky pipes, broken fences, even broken hearts if you gave him a cup of coffee and a little time. When he opened the door, the warm smell of fresh brew drifted out like a welcome. "Morning, Jennifer," he said, smiling. "What brings you out in this weather?" I shifted Pumpkin's crate in my hands. "I need a favor, just for a few days." His brow softened. "Trouble?" "Something like that." He didn't push. That was the thing about Sam. He never took more of the story than you offered. He took the crate with a gentle nod. "She'll be fine here. Still have that old fleece blanket from my dog. She can claim it." "Thank you," I said, really said, because he had no idea how much it meant. When I stepped back outside, the cold hit me hard, like the world trying to wake me up. I tightened my scarf and glanced at my house across the road. From this distance, it looked picture perfect. Snow frosting the roof, smoke threading from the chimney, a wreath glowing on the front door. A postcard of peace, and for the first time, I hated how perfect it looked. Because behind that postcard was a place where my choices had stopped mattering. Inside, the silence felt heavier without Pumpkin's soft footsteps. I stood in the living room, staring at the rug where she liked to nap, and something in me clicked into place. If Ryan wanted a spotless house for his guests, I'd give him one. I started in the guest room, stripping sheets, straightening pillows, and then, slowly, I took the brush I'd used on Pumpkin that morning and ran it lightly over the bedspread. Just a few gentle strokes, enough to leave a whisper. Then under the couch cushions, along the rug's edge, across the curtains. I wasn't careless. I was meticulous, intentional. As I moved from room to room, my resentment sharpened into clarity. I thought of Claire's polite smiles that never reached her eyes, the way she called me Jen, like she was trimming off pieces of me to make me easier to fit into her world. I thought of the way Ryan looked at me lately, like an item on his list he needed to handle. Every memory stung, but instead of breaking me, they steadied me. When I was done, the house looked immaculate. Not a soul walking in would suspect anything. I lit a pine candle in the kitchen and stepped back, arms folded. I could almost hear Ryan saying, "See, Mom, that wasn't so hard." But it was hard. It was hard to swallow disappointment and pretend it didn't ache. It was hard to be told, again and again, that my feelings were a complication instead of something worth considering. By nightfall, the wind had picked up, carrying the scent of snow and pine through the cracks in the window frame. I brewed a cup of tea and sat by the fire, the house so quiet I could hear every tick of the hallway clock. This quiet wasn't lonely anymore. It felt claimed, chosen. I glanced at the empty chair where Pumpkin usually curled up and whispered, "You'll come home soon, I promise." And I meant it. But when she did, it wouldn't be the same, because by then I'd already made up my mind. I wasn't going to keep carving out pieces of myself so other people could stretch out comfortably. The snow kept falling, soft and steady, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel small inside my own home. I felt ready. By Christmas Eve, the house looked like something lifted straight from a postcard. The tree glowed softly in the corner, stockings hung in neat rows, and the air carried the warm scent of cinnamon and pine. I stood by the window, watching a pair of headlights crawl carefully down the icy road toward my driveway. My stomach tightened as I heard the crunch of tires in the snow. They were here. Ryan stepped through the door first, brushing snow from his jacket. "Hey, Mom," he said, like nothing uncomfortable had happened days earlier. Claire followed with a smile that was too bright, too polished, the kind of smile that hides irritation beneath courtesy. Doris trailed behind in a cream-colored coat, clutching a tissue like it was armor. "Jennifer," Doris said, her voice airy but edged, "thank you for having us. It's all very lovely. I just hope you cleaned thoroughly. I react almost immediately." I forced a smile. Of course. I scrubbed every surface twice. I didn't tell her how many hours I'd spent making sure everything looked perfect. I also didn't tell her I'd made sure the house remembered what she wanted me to forget. The children burst in laughing, their excitement filling the room, and for a moment the tension loosened. Ryan gave me a quick, distracted hug before turning to help Claire with the bags. "You didn't have to go all out, Mom. We could have handled things," he said. I wanted to tell him, "You didn't even want me to keep my own cat." But I swallowed it. My chest tightened, and still, I smiled. "You're my family. I wanted it to feel special." Dinner went smoothly at first. Doris complimented everything with that airy tone that somehow made every praise sound like a critique. "Oh, you made all this from scratch. That's impressive, considering how much work it must be at your age." Claire laughed politely, but her eyes flicked toward her mother, checking my reaction. I nodded, passed the rolls, and let the words disappear into the pit where years of swallowed comments already lived. But then Doris started to sniffle. "It's starting," she said, dabbing her nose. "I knew it. There must be pet hair somewhere. My throat feels tight already." Ryan set his fork down, disappointment clouding his face. "Mom, we talked about this. Did you get the vents cleaned like I said?" I folded my napkin and kept my voice steady. "Yes, every vent, every rug, every cushion. I replaced all the filters." Claire took a sip of water, her tone soft and reasonable in that way people sound when they're placing blame gently in your lap. "Maybe the scent just lingers," she said. "Animals leave energy behind. Sometimes it sticks to the walls." Energy behind, as if I were nothing more than a lingering inconvenience. "Maybe," I said. "Some things don't go away easily." Doris coughed dramatically into her napkin. "I'll survive," she sighed. "I just don't want to ruin everyone's holiday." Her tone made it clear exactly who she thought would ruin it. I cleared plates with practiced hands, keeping my breathing even. Every time Ryan asked, "Mom, can you grab?" I did. Every time Claire suggested a change, I smiled. Sometimes silence is sharper than arguments. That night, after everyone went to bed, I slipped into my coat and walked across the road to Sam's. He was sitting by his wood stove, reading the paper. He didn't ask a single question when he saw the look on my face, just stood and brought Pumpkin to me. The cat purred the moment I opened the crate. "She missed you," he said. "I missed her more." The walk home was quiet, the snow glittering under the moon like someone had sprinkled the night with stars. When I opened the door, Pumpkin trotted in as if she'd never been gone. She leapt onto her favorite chair and curled up instantly. The next morning, Doris's sneezing began before breakfast. "Jennifer," she called, her voice raspy. "Did you open a window? It's worse today. I can barely breathe." I stepped out of the kitchen, a tray of coffee mugs in my hands. "No, the windows are closed. Maybe it's the weather." Claire appeared behind her, panic widening her eyes. "Mom, maybe you should lie down. I'll grab your inhaler." Ryan came down the stairs just then, brow furrowed. "Mom, where's Pumpkin?" I paused. "She's here," I said calmly. "She came home." "What?" His tone snapped, sharp and accusing. "You said you'd take care of it." "I did," I said. "I took care of her." Before he could answer, Doris erupted into another round of exaggerated coughing. "This is ridiculous," she gasped. "I can't stay here another minute." Claire guided her toward the door, while Ryan dragged their suitcases down the hallway. I stayed still. I didn't need to say anything. They packed fast. The sound of zippers and frantic footsteps replacing the laughter that used to fill the house. When Ryan passed me, his eyes were hard. "You could have made this easier," he said. I met his stare. I did. He didn't respond. When the door shut behind them, the silence left in their wake was heavy, but not sad. I began turning off lights one by one, letting the glow from the Christmas tree settle softly around the room. Pumpkin stretched on the rug, purring like she understood exactly what had happened. I sank into the chair by the window, my heart still steady and strong. For years, I'd mistaken silence for peace, but watching their headlights vanish down the snowy hill, I finally understood. Peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the refusal to let yourself be erased. The house creaked in the wind, and I thought of all the times I'd folded myself small just to keep others comfortable. I'd always been told love meant sacrifice, but tonight I realized something new. Love, I decided, means finally refusing to disappear. After they drove away, the sound of their tires crunching through the snow faded into nothing until only the wind remained, humming softly against the windows. The house looked peaceful again, almost untouched, but the air still held their voices, the complaints, the sighs, the quiet judgment that had seeped into every corner. I walked through each room slowly, collecting half-empty mugs, folding the blankets that had slid off the couch, noticing the little trails they'd left behind. Everything they touched seemed to hum faintly with resentment. Pumpkin trailed after me, her tail brushing my leg as if to remind me I wasn't as alone as I felt. I knelt to scratch behind her ears. "It's just us now," I whispered. The words settled heavy, but sure. For the first time in years, they didn't feel like a loss. Their suitcases, bright, expensive things that looked wrong in my old house, sat by the stairs like abandoned thoughts. Each one was heavy, stuffed with everything they thought they needed. I carried them outside one by one. The cold bit into my hands, but I kept going, lining the suitcases neatly across the porch. I brushed the snow from the tops and stepped back. They looked out of place against the quiet white morning, like intruders waiting to be escorted out. Back inside, I sat at the kitchen table and reached for my old address book. My hands were steady this time. I found the number of the locksmith I'd used after my husband died, a good man, quick, quiet, and kind. When he answered, I said, "It's Jennifer Lewis. I need my locks changed tonight." No questions. "Of course, ma'am. I'll be there within the hour." While I waited, I made tea and watched the steam rise in the dim light. I could still see the faint marks on the table where Ryan had leaned earlier, his voice sharp with irritation. "You could have made this easier." The words twisted inside me. I had made everything easier, every year, every visit, every conversation. I had smoothed their paths while letting mine crack beneath my feet, but not anymore. When the knock came, I opened the door without hesitation. The locksmith was young, polite, his breath fogging in the cold. "Evening, ma'am," he said, rubbing his gloved hands. "Cold night for changing locks." "Cold is fine," I said. "I just need a clean start." He nodded. Maybe he'd heard that before. The sound of his tools filled the house. Small clicks, the tap of metal, the quiet rhythm of rebuilding. Pumpkin sat in the doorway, watching as if she understood. When he finished, he handed me 2 new keys, cold and bright in my palm. "All set," he said. I paid him, thanked him, and stood alone for a moment after he left, the keys pressing into my hand like a promise. I hung one on the hook by the door and tucked the other into my pocket. Before heading upstairs, I opened the drawer near the entryway and took out the brochures I'd picked up weeks earlier from the allergy-friendly inn downtown. Allergy Safe Lodge, $185 per night. I circled the title in red pen and placed the brochures neatly on top of the suitcases outside. I smiled, small but real, imagining their faces when they returned for their things. Inside, the fire had burned low. The only sound was the wind slipping through the trees. I sat by the window with my tea and let the quiet settle over me. For years, I'd mistaken silence for defeat, believing that not pushing back meant losing. But this silence felt different. It was steady. It was mine. I thought of Ryan as a little boy, the way he'd cling to my hand when he needed comfort. Somewhere along the line, that warmth had been replaced by distance, by obligation. And I had let it happen because I believed that was what mothers were supposed to do, endure without asking for anything in return. But tonight, for the first time in a long while, I felt peace. Real peace, born from letting go. Pumpkin hopped onto my lap and curled into a warm ball, her purr deep and steady. I rested my hand on her back, feeling her breathing under my palm. The resentment I'd carried for years wasn't gone, but it had quieted like a storm finally passing. Outside, the snow began to fall again, covering the tracks their car had left behind. By morning, it would be as if they had never been here at all. Maybe that was how it was meant to be. My house didn't need their noise, their demands, their careful dismissiveness. It needed the fire, the creak of old floorboards, the soft purr of the one creature who'd never asked me to be less. I finished my tea, turned off the last light, and whispered into the quiet room. "This is my home." And for the first time, I didn't say it to reassure myself. I said it because it was true. The morning after I changed the locks, the world outside looked clean again. Snow covered every inch of the porch, smoothing over the footprints they'd left behind. I sat at the kitchen table, the room warm from the old radiator, the smell of fresh coffee filling the quiet air. Pumpkin lay curled on the windowsill, her fur glowing in the pale winter light. There were no voices, no demands, no one telling me what I should or shouldn't feel. Just stillness. I picked up my phone and saw 3 messages from Ryan. The first, "Mom, we're coming back for our stuff. Please don't make this harder." The second was colder. "What you did was unnecessary. Claire's upset." The last, "We need to talk." I set the phone down beside my mug and didn't reply. For years, I had answered every call the moment it came, rushed to soothe every problem, folded myself neatly into whatever shape he needed. Now, I let the screen fade to black. It felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I hadn't even realized I'd lost. Outside, sunlight glazed the frozen lake, turning it into a sheet of dull silver. The stillness reminded me of mornings long before things became complicated, before Claire, before the tension, before the quiet erosion of being treated like an afterthought. Ryan used to sit at this very table coloring Christmas cards, humming off key. The memory should have warmed me, but instead it hurt. It showed me just how far we'd drifted. Pumpkin jumped down and brushed against my leg. I bent to pet her. "You were right to come home," I whispered. She blinked slowly, as if agreeing. By noon, the snow began to melt, dripping from the eaves like a patient clock. I made myself a small lunch and ate in silence, wondering what Ryan would say if he saw me now. He'd call me stubborn. Claire would call me dramatic. And Doris, she'd find a way to declare I'd lost control again. Those words used to shrink me. I'd turn them over in my mind until they felt like truth. But sitting here now, in the quiet of a house that finally felt like mine, they sounded like a distant radio I no longer had to listen to. My phone buzzed again. Another message. "Mom, please just answer. You're making this worse." I smiled faintly. That was always the pattern. When guilt didn't work, blame stepped in. I knew that choreography too well. Every time I tried to set a boundary, I was told I was being emotional, unreasonable, difficult. All I had ever wanted was respect. Not obedience, not control, just respect. I picked up my phone, not to answer, but to scroll through the old photos. One stopped me cold, a picture from 2 Christmases ago. Ryan's family posed in front of the tree, everyone smiling. And there I was standing behind them, holding Pumpkin half out of frame. Not centered, not included, just present enough to prove I existed. I deleted it. Then I deleted every message thread that made my chest tighten. The silence afterward wasn't empty. It was honest. Later, I took Pumpkin outside, wrapping her in a soft blanket. We sat on the porch steps, the air crisp and bright. Across the lake, the trees cast long blue shadows on the snow. The world didn't feel heavy anymore. It simply was. And for once, I felt like I was part of it instead of apologizing for taking up space. For years, I thought love meant bending, proving myself, over-explaining, shrinking my needs down to something polite. I thought forgiveness was the tax you paid to stay in someone's life. But with Pumpkin purring against my chest, I realized love wasn't supposed to hurt like that. It wasn't supposed to erase me. As the sun slipped behind the ridge, I stood and brushed snow from my coat. I looked toward the road where their car had disappeared the night before. Somewhere down that highway, they probably believed I'd call soon, apologizing, explaining, smoothing things over. But I wouldn't. I had nothing left to justify. I went back inside, lit a candle on the table, and watched the flames sway in the draft. The house felt alive again, breathing with me, not against me. Pumpkin settled into the chair across from me, eyes half-lidded as if guarding our small, fragile peace. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't angry. I wasn't anxious. I was simply free. And if Ryan comes back someday, I'll open the door. But not the way I used to. I'll listen, I'll nod, and I'll decide if his words deserve to stay, because this home, this quiet, this peace, I earned it, every inch of it. And if you've ever been told you're too much or not enough, remember, you don't need anyone's permission to protect your own heart. Sometimes strength is just the courage to lock the door and begin again.